You are listening to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, a podcast where three women discuss horror movies from the silent era through the 1970s. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, and Anchor. Timely, topical, terrifying. Hello, everyone. Welcome to, though you don't know this, take two of The Thing from Another World versus John Carpenter's The Thing. Versus is a little aggressive, but so we did this once, but we had technical difficulties, so we get to do it again. So you may be getting the better version or the worst version. You won't know. We might, but we won't tell you. But here is the thing, though. The thing about the thing.
So bad.
So we did Halloween last month, and the children, during the whole boogeyman scene and everything and the babysitting scene, they were watching Dr. Demento, and the movie that was playing on Dr. Demento was The Thing from Another World, which was filmed in 1952. And we know that obviously John Carpenter in 1982 did a remake of it called The Thing. And at the time we were kind of discussing that we thought that he must have had it on the brain to be doing this movie all along, which is not necessarily true. We discovered after we did our research on The Thing. But since we saw it there and we were like, what do we do in November? We were like, why don't we do The Thing from Another World and The Thing? Because we were pretty sure The Thing from Another World was not going to be a great movie. And it's not, but that's okay.
It's entertaining, but it is not high cinema.
Yeah, it's forgettable, but we'll get to that. So, because we did that, we were like, let's do this, and then let's do the good version, which is John Carpenter, because it's epic. So we'll start with The Thing from Another World. Yeah. So as Rebecca put it, I don't know if you want to put it again yourself or.
Sure. I called it like classic 1950s drive-in movie, where the monsters fall into kind of one of two categories. They fall under the radioactive mutant monster, or they fall under the alien monster. And today you got aliens.
Yeah. So yeah, it's your classic, after World War II, paranoia about a lot of stuff. Xenophobia.
And xenophobia.
Yeah. And so backing up a little bit, both these movies are based off of a book called Who Goes There? Is it John Campbell who wrote it? It's somebody Campbell,
Yes.
right?
Yes, John Campbell. And I have the novella on downloaded on Libby. I just need to get around to actually sitting down and reading it.
But Betsy has read it.
Great.
She read it in school for
Yes, I did. I read it in a sci-fi class. One of the classes that we took was on speculative fiction and science fiction. But because I was in a master's level and also an adult course, it's an abbreviated course, so we read a whole lot of novellas. And it was one of the novellas that we read. It's a good standalone story. You can see where they pulled information from. It doesn't go into a whole lot of detail on what the aliens are either, or how they work or anything like that. But it's a pretty good, solid, like spooky tale as far as that goes.
Yeah. So the short plot of The Thing from Another World, it's after the war. There is research scientists in the, correct me if I'm wrong, in the Arctic in this one.
Yes.
Where there are bears.
Polar bears, yes.
There are bears.
Polar bears.
And you have a newspaper reporter and a flight crew, and they get a call. It says that they found something in the ice, and they have to go out to the research site. And of course, you have a gorgeous 1950s pinup lady up there, and like one scientist wife who's apparently also a nurse, and then the rest of the cast is all male, which is one of the advantages this movie does have over John Carpenter's. But we'll get back to that. And they get there, and there's this great scene where they go out to the ice and they like kind of map out that there's a ship there, and then they try to get it out of the ice using thermite charges, and they blow up the ship. But they also find a survivor, and they dig it out in a nice ice sarcophagus. It's not actually a sarcophagus, but that's just what they dig out, a nice chunk of ice with it in it. And
giant ice cube.
Yep.
Yep.
They take it and they store it, and they have a window open to try to keep it cool. And one really scared watchman puts an electric blanket on it.
Doesn't realize the blanket's turned on.
Because yeah. And of course the alien melts out of it, and you have a really, they don't show him much, thankfully, because it's terrible. They had clearly no budget for it at all, and you can tell they have a little bit of prosthetic with a large forehead, as you can see behind me here. Actually, this rendition is better than the actual
Is
in the movie.
I thought I read something to the effect where they'd done some makeup, and then it was like the director or somebody who goes, I do like the little Frankenstein-y thing on his head to give the increased size.
Yeah, well, because they wanted to make it look non-human, but they also didn't have a budget, and so it was like he almost looked like he was wearing trash bags. It was terrible, and the actor who had to portray him he didn't even go see the movie. He was like, "No."
To me, it looked a little bit like they had kind of stuck a nylon over his head,
and then stuck foam under it to not good at all. But it is basically a vegetable. Well, it's a plant. Vegetable is a little strong of a definition. It is something herbaceous, and
like a carnivorous plant,
and it likes blood. And the fear is that it propagates quickly, and also that it's trying to kill the people anyway. So one scientist likes to feed it the blood, and he made little to no sense. The beginning, let's not just kill it out of hand. That always makes a little sense, but he got to the point where after it was trying to kill people, and even he tried to communicate with it, and nothing was happening besides it going smash.
Yeah.
He's like, it's wiser than us. We must preserve it. We should die for the science of wiser, which was just
no, we shouldn't.
There was no proof that he was wiser at all. None. No, he had tech. Having tech does not make you smart. Every idiot on this earth now has a cell phone. Not every person on this earth is not an idiot. Just, as a point.
Accurate. Well said. Yeah.
And so, and the rest of it, you're kind of dealing with the military guys trying to shut down the scientists, rightfully so, because they're the crazy scientist goes on to plant, let me use the right word, more little aliens. Having no idea what's going to happen, which, granted, that's science sometimes. You're like, I don't know what this thing is going to do. Let's try it. However, in this case,
experiment, I admire the fact that when he noticed that it was propagating rapidly and knew that it was going to take over the earth, he was like, no, it's fine. It's smarter than us.
Yeah.
Fuck you. I know people smarter than me. They don't get to take over me. No.
That's spurious, sir. Spurious.
Yes. Let us be friends. No, how about not?
For an initial attempt of communication, but when you already know that it's going to live off your blood and it's not really trying to talk to you,
and that it has cut off the power to the station so that you will slowly freeze.
Yeah,
might be a sign it does not have your best interest at heart.
Mirror.
Yeah. They also did discover that since obviously it can survive deep frost, that was not the way to kill it. So heat, because our lovely vivacious pinup secretary is also intelligent. She's not just a pretty face, lucky her. And she's the one that comes up with stuff like, so how do you kill a vegetable? She's like, you boil it, you fry it, you saute it. They're like, oh, heat. Yes, heat. So, they decide that they're going to kill it with heat, and their first thought is fire. But then another guy's like, well, fire can burn everything. Why don't we just rig a trap and electrocute it and heat it that way? And they're like, genius. It's like genius.
They tried to burn it a little bit and then nearly burned down one of their buildings at the same time.
Exactly.
But
they accidentally stumbled upon. That was before they actually planned. That just kind of happened when it broke in, I think. It might have been
I
after the or the heat conversation. You might be right, but they weren't really planning the
It's
trap then. They were just
yeah,
reacting.
it was after the heat conversation because they had buckets of kerosene or whatever they were throwing on it.
Yes, but I think they had those anyway for the heater. But
Oh,
either
yeah.
way, you guys can watch it for yourself. We're not watching it again. We've already watched it several
We
times.
did it.
It
We
either
did it.
happened before or after, but the point of it was they were not actually planning the trap at the time. They just got attacked and they reacted with heat resources they had on hand. And then when they were fully planning on its demise, that's when they came up with let's electrocute it so we don't burn down the station.
Because electrocution is also heat.
Yes. And also because they already realized that fire can spread rather rapidly. It's probably safer not to go that route from experiment A that was forced upon them to.
Most definitely.
So so yes, so that is kind of the gist of the movie. There's some cute little highlights in there that makes it entertaining. It's not a horrible movie. It is not
No.
a scream again.
As I've oh God, no. As I've said previously, it is an entertaining film. It is not particularly high cinema
Mm.
at
No,
all, at least. No.
It's a nostalgic drive-in sort of horror movie.
Yeah.
I agree with
I
it's a drive-in type of a horror
yeah.
movie. Yeah.
I expected a lot less from it, which is why when it was somewhat better than those expectations, I was like, oh, I'm a little more favorable toward it.
It
I expected it to be fairly, monster in a rubber suit, which it
yeah.
wasn't. Yeah, well, it just wasn't quite that. God knows the monster was about on that regards, but I think they did better by not showing the monster very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did that deliberately when they saw the test cases of it because it was.
Oh yeah. Well, the guy who played the monster straight up said he looked like a giant carrot. Which he's not wrong.
Wrong.
Um, it looked like in Looney Tunes when they would have like a giant carrot walking around like with feet, like after Bugs Bunny. That kinda only white. It was a white carrot.
Mhm.
He was a white carrot. But
Well, he might have been orange, but it was a black and white movie, so you really wouldn't
you're
know.
right. We have no idea what color it was.
Might have been pink for all we know.
I like to think it was
On
pink.
green.
Yeah.
So, it's just funny
There
because
were
later on, John Carpenter referred to it as a space vampire carrot, basically,
Well,
which
yeah.
is not inaccurate on any level.
no, that's absolutely what it was.
They needed Bunnicula to counter the
Vampire
space
carrot,
vampire
remember?
carrot.
They did need they needed Bunnicula, obviously. Would have
I
made
mean,
it 10 times better.
when don't you need Bunnicula? Okay.
God, I love those books when I was little. Anyway,
Oh,
I did love, there was one scene that I really, really loved, and it was with the woman and the guy that she was kind of dating, where she literally like ties him to a chair and is like, okay, we're going to talk about us for a minute, and kind of like confronts him about like their relationship.
Well, his
Um,
behavior there one time too as well. Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. And then she's like kissing on him while he's all tied up. It was very cute. It was very like edgy for the time. Like, and then he
I was
gets himself loose and just
to
kind of
see that, I'm
grabs
not
her.
gonna lie.
Well, to be fair, he got loose a while ago and he behaved himself, and
I was
so
gonna say, he was behaving himself until he wasn't anymore. Then he was like grabbing her, but not grabbing her,
not
but like,
groping, but just
yeah, just like grabbed her waist and pulled her in and actually
yeah.
like kissed her more. But that was a really cute scene. There were some very fun scenes, and then there was a whole lot of 10 guys standing around not doing anything um in the middle of that. So there was like a huge cast. There were like scenes where there were like 40 men in a room, and I'm like, we don't need all these men. We don't. Even if they all work here, we don't need them all.
I think some of them were just there to die, but you didn't even care or notice that they died.
No, because they
The
weren't
movie
given
was not that
names.
engaging.
No.
Yeah, they could have cut the cast list a bit and been fine. One of them I recognized from This Island Earth. And one of them I am positive also played a pilot type in a Twilight Zone episode.
I believe
But
that is correct. Yeah,
yeah.
I believe that is correct.
But come on.
A lot of their faces look super familiar, and I'm sure
Yeah.
if you take the time to look them all up, you would be like, oh, this guy was in multiple stuff, and because they would look super familiar. But I did not take that time because that's who I am right now.
Well, and
But, this is the thing about the movie that I thought was funny. So, like, I was less engaged about the horror thing than trying to hear what the story was when she came down to Alaska to visit him, because that's where the whole like thing came out. Like, because the pilot's crew is picking on him about it and all this stuff, and it comes out in these small little snippets of story where like basically she had like bailed on him at some point, and he had passed out, and she'd like left a note on him that basically said, "Sorry, gotta go. You behave like shit," kind of thing.
I
Sort of
love that.
lighthearted, jokingly, and like his whole crew saw the note before he woke up, and so they kept riding his ass about it, and like so you get to the story that apparently like when he would come up and visit at the station, that was a nice kind of behavior, and was courting her, and then when she came down to visit him, he drank a lot and like grew extra arms and was not and she was
Not
super
particularly well
comfortable
behaved.
with, but it was the 50s, so she made a joke about it. So I was like, it was like my rewatches, I was paying more attention to that story going on than I was to the horror story, because they don't really develop the horror plot at all.
No, not really.
Vegetative, it likes blood, it crashed recently, and there's a scientist that thought we should all bow down and die to let the longest alien live, and everybody else was like, I'd like to live, fuck that alien. I mean, it's nice if there was a little medium ground where it's not either or, but in this situation, if you're not responding to me trying to talk to you and you look like you're about to eat me, I'm gonna kill you. That's who I am.
Yeah, the alien at no point gave any friendly overtures. The scientists should have realized this one, but we're not really good on communication of people sometimes.
I mean, to be fair, the first reaction once he melted out of the ice, the guy tried to shoot it. I don't know if he acted aggressively towards him or not. They don't really film on that because they're not trying to show the man in the suit, because it was an awful job. Not by the actor. I'm not trying to diss the actor. I think he did the best he possibly could with what he had.
Right.
The whole cast did what they could with the script that they were given.
Yeah. Absolutely. I do just want to point out that they tried to get the military to sponsor this film so that they could have actual military like vehicles and planes and things like that. But it was the 1950s and it was about a UFO. And so the military shut it down because they were very anti-UFO at the time. And they were very denial of UFOs, which is hilarious thinking about, the state that we're in now when they're releasing, oh, we knew there were UFOs way the hell back. And so I think it's very, very funny that is the reason that they might have had a bigger budget if they had the backing of the US, Air Force for it, but because they couldn't get that backing because it was involved in alien plot, they just had to deal with what they could get from the studio, which was, what they got. But yeah, I just loved that the reason that they couldn't get it was because UFO.
Yeah, they're like, that would like us be saying that the UFO is real and they're not real. And then 2023, oh yeah, that shit's better off for you. Of course, at this point, we're all like, yeah, we know.
We don't believe anything you say anyway. So
whatever. Look over here. Don't watch what we're doing here. Yeah, we know.
We know.
Anyway.
So yeah, so that's really just something just point out in contrast. They are maintaining radio as much as possible. And as soon as they don't respond, you hear a flurry of communications come in when the radio is back up. Like, why aren't you responding? Radio silence not necessary. We're coming over. And this is important because when we talk about the thing 1982, this actually comes into play in an interesting way. So yeah, definitely they're maintaining radio contact the whole time that they're as much as they possibly can, except for when they had a slight radio outage due to the storm. And yeah, other than that, the whole thing ends. They kill the thing from another world. The pilot and the secretary get together, and it's implied that they'll get married. It's a happy ending all around, except for the poor thing from another world, who, roasted into a pile of ash.
Pile of ash.
A pile of ash.
Mm-hmm. I hope they got rid of the scientist lab.
I think they destroyed that already. I kind of remember something where he said we lock him up and destroy the plants or something like that. Or I think they did destroy it. I kind of remember.
I couldn't remember if they had or not.
I don't think they show it, but I remember them mentioning it. But at this point, I could be making that up. So one of you, feel free, you, the audience, to watch and comment and let us know if that did happen or if Jenny's making things up after, hallucinating from watching this movie far too many times in a row. Like, it's not like I'll never ever watch it again, but it's going to be a couple years. It's going to be a couple years. It's enough of it. It's very boring. Well, not very boring. It's just bland. It's very bland.
I was gonna say there were moments where I was like, how much longer do we have in this movie? And
There
it
were a
would be
few
like,
times I was checking the runtime.
I mean, it's not horrible. It's just not really memorable. There's nothing about it that really makes it stand out from any other of the several other movies of this type that came out around this time period.
here's what I'm going to say. Be distracted. Like, this is a good one that if you're somebody who knits or crochets, do something with your hands while you're watching it, because that will take your mind away. Now, if you can do that mindlessly, don't do that. Play a game on your phone or something, but you don't have to pay attention to this film in any
You're
way,
not
shape,
going
or
to miss
form.
anything important
No,
that
no,
you can't figure out using deductive reasoning in 2 seconds.
correct. So,
Yeah.
So,
all
any
right.
other thoughts on The Thing from Another World, or should we move on to the?
No,
I
let's
think we
move
should
on.
move on. We said a lot about a movie that's very unremarkable.
So, John Carpenter's The Thing,
Much more
1982,
remarkable.
is very remarkable. Was a complete flop critically, box office wise. It shocks me to this day that that's the case. Obviously, since then, it's been reevaluated as being one of the most excellent horror films of all time, and yeah, and it's got a huge cult following. But when it came out, poof. John Carpenter had been contracted through the studio to do several movies, and this flopped, and he got shafted basically. That's how bad it flopped, and it's really shocking because like where you can zone out on The Thing from Another World, you don't want to blink when watching The Thing from 1982. You're gonna miss something, and every time you watch it,
I need details.
you're gonna find something else that you missed. Like just, oh my god, this, oh my god, that. And it's worth noting that like John Carpenter did not want to do another guy in a suit thing. He didn't want to do another lurking monster. He was very much not trying to do that, and he very much didn't do that, which is why he was super pissed off about about the poster art for it, because it basically depicts a man in the suit, and that was what he was not doing, and it's not what's in the movie. So he was a little frazzled over that. Yeah, he also was not the first pick to do it, which goes back to our comment where like when we were watching Halloween and we thought that he was already thinking about how he wanted to like do a version of The Thing because he had it in Halloween, but he didn't. He was not thinking about it. He liked the movie. It was one of his like favorite movies to watch for some strange reason, but he did not he was not thinking about rewriting it or directing it, and he actually did not do the writing of this one. He did like a treatment, but he was not the one who wrote this one. Whereas, a lot of he had just come off from writing Escape from New York in another film, and he was kind of written out. So somebody else did the screenplay for this, and he also was not the first pick on it. Originally, it was going to be Tobe Hooper who was going to do The Thing, but they hated his versions of it. He wanted to do some kind of like a horror space vampire comedy, and yeah.
That sounds like a lot
interested
to
to
throw
see what
together.
his version of a horror comedy would be, considering some of the shit that Tobe Hooper puts out. It's like, I think his sense of humor might be even darker and more twisted than mine, which is saying a lot. But yeah, they were like, no. And so they went to John Carpenter, since they had him, I think it was a 10-film contract, something along those lines that he was supposed to do. And, he was actually kind of like, I don't know. And then they're like, hey, read the source material. So he read Who Goes There, and he's like, oh yeah, I got this. Yeah. And then you have The Thing, 1982, which is not a man in the suit. Couple of differences. Again, not a man in the suit. I believe both Betsy and Rebecca have said this covers the source material, that guess Who Goes There more than
From what I understand, the monster in this one is closer to the source material than the
it's a
the other one.
shapeshiftery. It's able to take on memories and thoughts and emotions of the people who it is devouring. So it's more like this because they can, of course, pretend to be one of the people. So that means they have at least enough to be able to pretend. They have
Yeah.
that. So yeah, that's much closer to the book than, or the novella, than the
My
original.
thought too, that if it is taking in their form, I guess if you figure out that it's observing them, if it forms into them, isn't it also forming the same brain structures, which would encompass those, like much what you said, emotions, feelings, memories, and such? Yeah,
Possibly.
yeah,
Does a clone know it's a clone?
yeah.
But I mean, yeah, that's a whole other conversation we can have when we get into this more, because yeah, there's a lot of stuff. The more you watch it, the more you have some questions, and the more you notice these little flaws. But you don't really care because it's a really excellent movie anyway. And also, this is a scenario where the three of us will die in a horror film, because as soon as the lovely dog comes and jumps on us, we're hugging it and we're going to become the thing. You know?
We die very early in the film, thankfully, I guess.
I mean,
Puppy,
Yes.
I'm gonna die. It is very cute.
honestly, I'd probably be the guy who threw the grenade at himself. So, you know,
He didn't throw it
Well,
at himself. He went to throw it and he dropped it behind himself.
yeah,
I mean, the
admittedly,
effect was kind of the same, except for he had to dig in the ground.
he was
yeah,
digging for it. Yay! Sir.
yeah, yeah. That's also equally likely to be my demise in a
I mean, yeah,
situation
that
like
could
that.
happen too if I can make
Let's
myself
be
try to kill a
realistic.
dog. But once it morphed into the cute fuzzy dog, I'm probably not even trying to kill it anymore. I've now become the scientist in the first movie where I'm like, no, it's wiser than us. It's a puppy. Don't kill the puppy.
Okay, Mr. Alien, you can hang around only in that form. If you change, we're gonna have problems.
But don't
You have
hurt
to
other
show the
dogs.
yeah, and don't hurt the other dogs.
Very
You already
important.
had you already had one. You don't need any more.
He
So,
definitely hurt the other dog. Sorry, y'all.
I know he did. So
Yeah,
that, like, when
sorry.
I saw him try to do that, then I would be able to kill it until that point,
Yes.
which by then should be far too late, really. But
Yep.
yeah. So the actor that played the dog is Jed the dog. But though he is not the dog running in the opening credits, or the dog that is running and being shot in the because is another dog who's lovely that was made to look like Jed, the main dog. Jed was an excellent animal actor. He basically took cues very well, and he was able to like ignore the cameras and stuff and focus on where he was going. How the dog knew to do that, I can't tell you, but like the main scene where they show him like casually strolling down the hallway and looking for somebody to morph into or infect, because that's a weirder conversation there. He just does it. It took 5 takes. It takes way more than that with actual people actors often. It only took this
Yeah,
dog
you don't,
to get it right.
yeah, there's times where the director may go over the same scene all day and the act until the actor's like, if we do this one more time, I walk. Yeah, but the dog was wonderful. He was so calm. A lot of
Jed was
training.
a yeah. He was a wolf Malamute mix. I always stumble over Malamute. Sorry. And he's gorgeous, and that's why I would probably die, because I'd be cuddling Jed.
Yeah.
He was
He's
a
big,
beautiful
he's
dog.
big and fluffy. I have no defense.
Oh.
He was a
I
gorgeous
also
dog.
think the reason they had another dog running in the beginning, because if it is of the same type of makeup as my dog Ham, they probably couldn't get Jed to run.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my guess on that.
They might have had to hire the athlete and the thinker between the two dogs.
Yep. So yeah, but yeah. So basically, now we're in Antarctica. No bears, as opposed to the
That's
Arctic.
penguins.
Penguins, no bears. The point that I was making earlier about like you had radio communication maintained, and as soon as it got cut off, you got very stressful messages coming in the thing from another world. The thing they talk about not being able to talk to people for weeks because of the winter and stuff like that. And the truth is, if that had actually happened, squads would go out to figure out what was going on there. They would deploy to find out like what happened at the station, because it's, we haven't heard from them in 2 days. They tend to panic about those kind of things. So so it would not have gone well if they were not communicating steadily back and forth. And then the thing would have won, because they would have sent out rescue squads, and it would have taken over the rescue squad and then spread around. So just an interesting point of fact on that. But
Yeah. Yeah, the logic of let's destroy the radio, it'll keep it from spreading. That's not accurate.
Not this time
Someone's going
around.
to come to find out why you don't have radio access.
And whereas in Thing from Another World, we had a mad scientist like, no, we must preserve it. We had a mad scientist like, no, I'm going to break everything here and kill all you motherfuckers if I have to, because the shit is not spreading. so yeah, this scientist was not happening. Also completely devoid of anything female, anything except for like a game show hostess on the TV screen that they were watching. That's pretty much all the female you see. And there was some mention of trivia that there was a female cast member. It's not very clear if it was an actress or somebody in the crew. It just said cast member that laughed because she got pregnant and they replaced her with a male. So yeah, completely devoid of women. I just none. I don't know if John Carpenter's like can't figure that in because he didn't have Deborah Hill or what. Though he's written stuff since then, you know, that have women in it without Deborah Hill. So I don't know if he just couldn't.
Or if it's just a victim of the usual casting that, you know, if you have, say, 24, maybe 1 or 2 will be women, and then the rest of are usually guys.
I'm curious. I just thought about it. Like, they also used to do only male, like, space stuff, like spacewalks and things like that, because they didn't want sex to happen.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there might have been at one point that any Antarctic expedition, they only took same-sex people because obviously people of the same sex can't have sex.
I mean, it was the 80s though. Yeah. And they did have signs up about VD around the, you know, set in the scenes. I don't know if you noticed that in the rec room.
I did. I saw those.
But yeah, I mean, that's possible. You know, I mean, it's just possible unless there's a reason why you might be shocked out of your box. You may not be thinking outside of your box. So it just might have been that maybe there was no female characters in the original source material. I don't know. Betsy, maybe you can speak to that. Maybe they just.
I don't remember, but I'm going to say, off the top of my head, I'm going to say there wasn't. Let me double check for you. We can move on and I'll check that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not super important. It's just interesting to me because usually you see John Carpenter's cast being pretty diverse. And in this case, it's somewhat diverse. I mean, it's not all white, but it is definitely all male. And it might have been also, who knows, historically, maybe they only sent, you know, again, to your point, they might have only sent male crews out, especially during when the winter would happen because you can't do anything in the winter. Besides probably drink cocoa and alcohol and have sex. But interestingly, so a lot of the criticism about this movie was, one, they thought it was too gory, which I thought was funny because even by that standard, it's not super gory. There's a little gore, there's some gory scenes, but they're kind of creatively gory and not like, I wouldn't say they're gratuitously gory, if that makes any sense. But then again, you know, this is
so
many
30. It's not Renfield with gallons of fake blood.
I mean, like, I'm 48 years old. I've been watching horror movies since I was like 5 or 6. So we're looking at like 43 years of horror movie watching. So I might be a little jaded. Maybe it is super gory. And yeah, go ahead.
All male. It was an all male expedition in the book. So that may be where it came from, at least a little bit. But yeah, it was all men. In fact, some of the names are pulled directly from the book or the novella. So McCready.
Yeah. That we like to point out is Wilford Brimley is in this movie, and he's like actually 2 years younger than Rebecca and I are when this movie is filmed.
And looks 2 times older than us.
So but you see that a lot in some of the 70s and 80s stuff where like people that you think are like in their 60s are like 35. So it's interesting, but it's just funny when you look at that. And then, you know, also Kurt Russell was not the first pick for McGrady. They were afraid he was too pretty. And he is pretty. And I mean, feel dirty to say that because Kurt Russell's the same age as my parents, so I'm like, and he's still kind of hot. I'm not gonna lie. So cringes at that thought, but he's definitely pretty. They had a nice backstory for him, nice meaning thought out, not pleasant.
And then they got rid of it.
Well, they didn't get rid of it. They just didn't integrate it. But I mean, like they didn't speak it out. You can kind of, if you know what it is and then you see the movie, it makes sense that that's what's being acted out in there, but they didn't actually talk about it in the movie at all. It just never was something that was put in there. So basically, he was supposed to be a Vietnam war pilot, helicopter pilot. He was supposed to have experienced or been a part of something he was not super proud of during the war, and was therefore an alcoholic PTSD. You do see him with a bottle of J&B whiskey or Scotch whiskey the whole freaking time, pretty much.
Yeah.
And they mentioned the fact that he mentions a couple times where he hasn't slept. He gets very mad at the computer, which was voiced by Adrienne Barbeau, who was John Carpenter's wife at the time, and dumps his whiskey in it and destroys the computer because he was losing the chess game to it. But you never have, none of the characters do have any like talk about their background. So it's just not in there. And I also wonder how much got cut, because there's some weird things where they say things and you're like, but there's nowhere that was in the movie that they're referencing it. And that's something that I noticed again on this rewatch. It stood out to me that there was, please don't ask me to direct quote it, but it was certain things where they're like, well, this happened, and when that happened, and you're like, that never happened in the movie. So you're pretty sure something got cut somewhere.
When did that happen? Where did that happen? How did that happen? What are you talking about? But yeah.
Entirely likely. So
yeah, so I wonder, and there's probably I'm pretty sure there's probably been a nice release where they put in cut scenes and talked about it and stuff like that. And I'm probably Scream Factory, I'm sure did it. And I will probably have to get a copy of it. So, because I just, the more I watch it, the more I actually love this movie, despite the fact that the more I notice little weird things that are like, that's not consistent. I think they called that character by the wrong name. I don't know what's happening here. Yeah. So I mean, like, there's the whole scene where they not first, but after they realize something's wrong and they lock up Dr. Blair in the little hut by himself, you have that scene where I think it's Fuchs is in the lab, and he's like, I think he's supposed to be trying to develop a way to like either kill it or be able to identify who's been turned into the thing. And all you get out of him is that we should eat only canned food and prepare our own food.
yeah,
Right.
it seems a little weird.
And then he's writing, and then it gets dark. It feels like, well, did it just get dark? Like you don't get it. You don't hear a popping noise or anything to indicate that something's wrong. And then you have him like walk outside all scared, and he sees something. Well, he sees McReady's. That's the first time they show McReady's a shirt with his tag on it, which is for some reason that just hit this time. And then he's just gone. And then later on, they find him out there burnt to a crisp. And they're like, maybe he set himself on fire. So he would, so I feel like and then like later on, McReady's talking about that, the fuse blew and he was in the lab and he was with, in the dark for hours. And you're like, none of that is really clear. It's a very confusing bit there. That it was so like, like it took me several watchings to get even more confused about it, because it just seems like one of those things where you blinked and you missed the whole thing. And that's why I'm saying don't be distracted when you watch this movie.
No, this one actually watch it. Watch the whole damn thing.
Because I was just like, wait, what happened?
What?
Fuchs? And then also it was one of those things where Fuchs seemed to like have like 5 lines and you kind of forget who he was. And the only reason you remember his name is because they go looking for him and they say his names repeatedly, and you keep wanting to say, is it Fuchs or is it Fox? No,
yeah, I honestly, through both movies, I barely remembered anybody's name.
I mean, the characters are more distinct in a sense, but their names seem to be very like
random,
because they mix them up themselves when they're talking.
Yeah.
But I know, I just like the little stuff. I have to point out, so you could tell that John Carpenter really loved the first movie because he puts little odes to it throughout this one. Rebecca's favorite is when they're circled around to show the primitive zip of the ship after they go and explore their Norwegian outpost. After, so I guess we kind of skipped this. The movie opens with a helicopter from Norway following really low what appears to be a sled dog running across this open field, and they somehow are unable to shoot it, run it down, or hit it with a grenade all this time. And then it ends up going to the American outpost, and they land the helicopter, they get out, they say something in Norwegian which nobody understands, which I think is supposed to be, it's not a dog.
Something in that regards. It's a monster, it's a thing, whatever.
Yeah, they shoot at the dog and the people, and one of them tries to throw a grenade, as Betsy mentioned, and as they go to throw it, they drop it behind him, and then can't find it, even though there's a clear hole where it is, and they keep digging near the hole, but not actually where the hole where the grenade is, and then blow themselves in the helicopter up, which was also filled with kerosene. And the one Norwegian that was shooting at the dog gets shot in the head by Gary.
Well, this
It was
is
the
a
character's
shooting
name.
dog,
The old,
Sparks.
clearly naval type person that's of some
Yeah.
capacity there.
And I don't know about you, but if I accidentally drop a grenade, can't find it, I think I'm just gonna
I'm
run.
running. I'm running.
Yeah. It's remarkably fast for my aged fat self.
Or rolling or something, whatever I need to do to get through the snow as fast as I possibly can away from the grenade. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, when they go back to the Norwegian outpost to try to figure out what the hell happened, and that's where they find like the melted block of ice. Then they find all the stuff, and they bring it back, and they're looking at this footage, and you see like the ode to the thing from another world with them like marking out where the ship was, and they talk about putting
Yeah.
thermite in there and then blowing it up and so on. It's very sweet in my opinion. And also, whereas in the thing from another world, it was a crash that happened at that point in time. In the thing 1982, it was supposed to have been embedded in the ice for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So
I don't think they mentioned specific time, but you got the key that it was very, 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 very super long time.
yeah, they mentioned they go to the site where the ship was supposed to have been, and like he asked the scientist, like, given where this is ice, how long ago? He's like, at least 100 years was kind of what he says. They don't have an exact date, but they go with a guess from the layer of ice that it's in or something. But
I could have sworn they had said 100,000, but I could entirely be on crack.
you might be right. I just remember 100. It could be 100,000, could be hundreds
Yeah.
of years. It could be any variation thereof. Because although I've watched it repeatedly now, things are blurring.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved it. So like my favorite thing is like there's just the whole time you're engaged because there's always something happening in this movie. Always. Like,
Yes.
the dog's walking down the hallway, you see somebody sitting in a room that's just a silhouette, the dog walks in the room, you know who's infesting, you're kind of, you at this point, there's something weird because I mean, obviously, why are these two people shooting at a dog if there's nothing weird going on? And like you spend like most of the movie trying to figure out who it was he's with. And you can kind of figure out from the hair or the silhouette, but it doesn't come into play till nearly the end of the movie. And it's also one of those things that confuses me. So the first time the thing is revealed, he's put into a kennel with the other dogs. And like moments basically after he's put in there, and we'll say the Houndmaster, Clark, walks away. Who Clark they set up to look like he's been infested from the start. But it's interesting because he's very monotone and like he hesitates a lot but the thing that's like hint that he may not be is the fact that his cohorts do not respond like as if he's acting weird for him. So
right.
he's
the feeling that's usual behavior for him.
Right. You don't get anything going like Clark's acting kind of weird or anything like that at all. It's just you as a viewer like this guy seems kind of shady, but he's apparently just that's who he
being
is.
him. Yeah.
But yeah, so they put the dog in there, they put Jed in there, and then Jed's skin splits open and he spews, I don't know, digestive fluid on half the dogs, and it's very sad.
Absorbs them in some manner. Yes, it is sad, especially when you see one dog biting the cage to try to get away. I'm like, oh, poor baby, you're scared.
And then you find out that some of them made it out, and then like later on, the doctor that loses his mind because he wants to make sure it doesn't split goes and kills them all.
Yeah. Thank God that part was.
They don't show it, thankfully. Yeah, like I don't think I can watch it.
I'd have been like, nope, I'm sorry, I'm not watching the rest of this movie.
Done with it. Yeah.
And that was at least by the time we got to that part. I mean, a lot of this is practical effects and pretty good practical effects, but I have to say that at least the dogs looked like stuffed dogs enough that I wasn't like they're actually harming an animal right now. So that was really a positive for me because by the time they got to the actual like body horror on the dogs, it looked like a stuffy, not like
freeze-dried.
Yeah, that part was a little. You're like, yeah.
It's a lot. There's a couple times where you watch it and you're like, I could see where they thought this was hokey, but mostly the effects are really great. There's that time where like some of the dogs look very fake. There's another time where the scene where he's testing the blood, and he grabs the other guy like he bites the other guy's head and is shaking around. It's clearly a rag doll. It's very bad. But I mean, like a lot of it is great practical effects. And then you have a couple moments where, and it's funny, like you have to watch it over and over and again to really catch the really bad ones because you just get distracted by all the great stuff that's going on. And like after you've seen it 3 times in a row, then you're like, oh, that, I think the stuffing is actually flying out of that while it's tearing at it. That's just not...
Yeah. Yeah, the effects, the practical effects were pretty good for the time period which they were in, which is why I think the movie still holds up.
Absolutely.
But at the time they got trashed. They were said that they were hokey and not well done, and yeah.
They were on
It was
par
also-
with other 80s movies that I've seen.
I know.
They were.
It almost
Well,
feels like someone was out to get John Carpenter. Like I don't know, like the level of negative reviews it got, it just seems like they
Which is
just
shocking now because if you look at it on Rotten Tomatoes, it has like an 85% for critics and then a 92 with audiences, which is huge.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a well-received film, but yeah, at the time it was panned. Like, but I was thinking about it and I'm like, all right, but what sci-fi movies did we have before this? And most of them would have been a creature feature, but they wouldn't have had like the blood, they wouldn't have had the guts at all. Like this one really did take it to that next
well, you had Alien that just came out.
Right.
One. And so it was compared to that. And I won't say that it doesn't compare to that because it's just completely different.
They're very different films.
And if you were watching this expecting Alien, you're not going to get it. And I think that might have been part of it. Blade Runner came out at the same time as this. Not an Alien film, but so I think they were feeling it wasn't cutting edge enough when it came to the effects when you think about Alien and when you think about like Blade Runner, but it's just not fair comparisons. You know what I mean?
No, none of those are really in the same categories. So I don't think there's a side-to-side comparison you could make.
A lot of the Alien special effects, just because I've watched a couple of specials on it, were like the reason that it looks so good is because they did it in the dark. What you're looking at is like a dude with 2 trash bags on a stick. But because they did it in the pitch black with the lighting the way it was, it looks really good. They also did it all in slow motion. So it looked really, really creepy. But they had to move really, really slow because at the same time that they were shooting that, they were shooting Little Shop of Horrors and they were doing that the same thing. So that's a fun, stupid fact about 2 movies we're not talking about. But I think that there was a lot of, I can see where in a comparison, this would be an odd film because it's not super sci-fi, but it is sci-fi because it involves aliens. So it is like sci-fi, but it's more of a horror, but less of a horror and more of a thriller because it's a lot about who is the alien. So I can see where when you don't have anything to compare this to, it may have been a bit of an odd film. But then going back to watch it, you're like, but it's so good at all these things. It is a sci-fi thriller horror that fills all of these roles.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I think that's why I love it. And I think that's why it stands out because it's just, it is so much and so well done considering all of the genres that it's mixing in,
Yeah.
It stands alone. Like, I don't know anything else that quite has that level. I'm like, you have horror movies with saboteurs and, who's the werewolf, but this level, because I mean, this is the thing we talked about this, the first recording that didn't record that you guys won't ever know, but like it, to me, every time I watch it, it's really clear to me that the people in it weren't sure if they would know if they were it.
So the things, nothing about this alien, so are you going to know if you are? Who is the enemy? Is it me?
Yeah, which is funny because McReady, Kurt Russell's character, he had a very strong sense that it was not him, which is interesting to me. He's like, I know I am not it. I am not the thing. But when he's testing other people's blood, you can see like Keith David, who I love, by the way. I cannot say enough about Keith David. He's a phenomenal actor, phenomenal voice actor, and he does not get his dues, in my opinion. Like, he should have acclaims. He should have Oscars. He is phenomenal. I love him so much, and his repertoire is amazing, and it just spans the field. And yeah, so I just got a shout out to Keith David before I keep going. But anyway, he does this great job. So they have him tied to this chair with other people they suspect might be the thing, and then doing a heat test. So they basically cut, which I'll go by why this watching I got even more questioning on this. But so McReady, Kurt Russell, comes up with this theory that since every piece of it is also a whole, based on the fact that Norris, when he died and split apart into pieces, like parts of him were walking away and reforming into other things. And based on that, he felt like any part of a organism would then react to being attacked. So he has one person cut everybody open and get petri dishes of their blood separated, which to me, this is where it was funny. Like, well, if everything's going to react, then wouldn't you trying to cut it actually cause it to react? That's my one iffy thing. But anyway, we'll let that alone. We'll assume that the blood is involuntary and the physical cutting would be they had control and could choose not to react. We'll just say that that's what it was.
that was my theory on it.
But but then he heats up a wire and he's like, so my theory is that if I put this hot, attack on this blood, that it's going to cause the organism to try to defend itself. And he gets to Keith David's child's blood and he goes, see if it's you. And you can see Keith David / child's just looking like worried. Is it me? I don't know. And he literally lets out a breath of relief when it ends up not being him. And it's just so great.
Well, and
it's one of those little touches that can never be replicated by AI, you ask me.
Right. Well, and it's also one of those things where I'm like, okay, I'm one of those people that if I have to have a background check for something, I will panic a little bit. Because what if I have a felony that I don't know I have? Now, how can you have a felony you don't know you have? You can't. But I will do a moment of like, oh God, I'm going to have to get like this thing. And it's like, I know I'm clear. There's no reason why I wouldn't pass a background check, but I will have
steal my identity. I don't know.
Let's talk about when you get a letter from the IRS and you're like, oh my God, what is this? Oh, it's the background check for a friend that applied there. Oh, okay, I can stop panicking now. I'm not getting audited.
But truly, you have that moment of panic, like, did I do something wrong? So I can see where in this really super heightened situation where you're like, oh God, what if I am? Like, I don't feel like I am, but what if I am?
Yeah.
Like, what happens then? We've been bringing this up a lot, but like with COVID, like when there's that moment where you're like, am I carrying this? Am I going to give it to someone else on accident? Like, what if I don't realize? Only to a 100th degree, because it's like, am I the problem here?
Am I the monster that's going to destroy the human planet? Destroy every human on Earth.
Yeah, it's just a wild. But you can see that's exactly how you would react to that. Like, it totally makes sense. And I think they did a really good job of building that suspense too, of making it like, at first everybody's just kind of like, oh my God, what the hell is happening? But then they're just getting more and more paranoid. And the paranoia just gets more and more and more. And as an audience member, you are also getting paranoid. Like, who the hell is it? Who is it?
Mm-hmm.
And, at one point I was like, is it all of them? I don't trust any of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the funny thing too, because it seemed like sometimes the thing knew what it was and sometimes it didn't. So like when Bennings took over, it was clear that he was trying to run away and escape because he knew he was a thing. Yeah. But when you had Norris, the guy who ended up becoming like the bear trap that ate Cooper's hands, Copper's hands, not Cooper. It seemed like he didn't know. You know what I mean? Like, he was not trying to hide. He seemed very scared. I mean, like, it could have been the thing acting, but he really just seemed like, and also he never morphed or attacked anyone. He had like a heart attack or something. And like, he didn't morph into like a killing thing, alien thing, until they tried to revive him by electric, the paddles, which electrocuted it, and then it responded and, said, stop hurting me, eat. And so like, then you wonder, like, is there variations on it? Is there like different, what, like, is there a slow growing one that takes you over and you don't know? And that's what happened with Norris. Is there the fast one that you eats you and then becomes you and makes your clone? And then does your clone know it's the thing, or does your clone
Right.
just the thing that can act out as you? Like, there's a lot of questions, and I love it. And I love that they don't fucking answer any of them. Like, sometimes it's bad writing, and who knows, maybe it was bad writing, but it works for this.
Yeah, it absolutely
I,
works.
I think it helped in amping up the paranoia and concern.
Agreed.
Yeah, because not one of the people who presented the same way, so that you couldn't predict who was going to be the person. Because, like, the dog just, it seemingly came out of nowhere. The dog wasn't threatened at all. Like, it just split its head open and started, eating the other dogs, seemingly kind of out of nowhere. Whereas some of the other ones, they waited until they felt threatened to attack. And then, other ones, it was something else. It's very unpredictable the way that and I think that maybe the idea is it's learning and evolving and figuring out, like, this is the
I can
best
see
way to
that.
do this.
Yeah.
But because of that, you never know who's going to be the person, because no one person showed the exact same. And some people looked totally guilty the whole time and weren't. And then some people, you're like, I mean, he's just acting the same way he was when he came on screen 20 minutes ago, and he was the thing. So there's no rhyme or reason, but it works that way
Even at
because
the
it does.
end, you don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Even at the end, so they leave it unanswered, which I can see what that would have pissed off a bunch of people, because normally people want things wrapped up in a nice little package.
Yeah, I don't, but I do want a sequel still. But no, I mean, like, so one thing is, like, it brings you along with, as Betsy was pointing, it really brings you along to the point where when you're watching the scene when they're testing the blood, like, you're invested. You're like, I don't know who it's going to be either. Like, you're making your own guesses about who you think it's going to be, and then it's like, oh, him, oh, oh, wait, so it's really well done. But yeah, the end scene is lovely. So they go with the last remaining, I think it was like 3 or 4. So I think it was 3. I think it was McReady, Childs, and Knowles, I think, were the 3 that was left.
I believe so.
About that. And you see them Molotov cocktails and all that stuff getting together, and then you hear like a thud, and Knowles has gotten it, and then you hear McReady call it for Childs and no response, and McReady's like, fuck, and he ends up blowing up the whole station, because they basically make this they come to the conclusion they got to stop it. Killing themselves, whatever, doesn't matter. They got to stop this because it's going to end all the humanity. Well, actually, going to not even just humanity, all life as we know it on planet Earth for the most part. So, yeah. So McGrady blows it up, and then, like, you think it's all done, and then out comes Childs, and they have this little conversation. Basically, it comes down to, you could be it, I could be it. If we got any surprises for each other, I don't think we're able to do a damn thing about it right now. Let's just sit here by the fire and freeze to death, which is funny, though, because that was the thing they were trying to stop from happening. They were trying to stop the thing from freezing itself and going dormant, and then when somebody else coming out and getting it. So
if they really were concerned about stopping it, they needed to somehow burn themselves to death.
Yeah, they had to come up with a plan, and they didn't. So, but I mean, actually, you don't know that they didn't. What you know at the time is, at that moment, they're not planning on doing a fucking thing.
You're right.
Which is why I'd like a sequel. Like, I don't really care that it ended up. I just want more, is basically it. I want more. And because it was just so great. And I think that if John Carpenter was given this movie, a sequel and a budget, I think he can come up with something really fun.
I think
and
so.
wouldn't it be great to have like an old Kurt Russell come back into Has he been a thing all along? Did he?
Yeah.
Him and Keith David. Let's not play around. Let's bring them both back and wonder if one of them actually was a thing when there's a new outburst of the thing.
Yeah, because what if one of the other stations, we haven't been hearing from them. Let's go check on them.
Which would happen in reality, because no radio.
Earlier, and who knows? Does somebody show up 20 minutes later after the end of the film, be like, for fuck's sake, what happened here? Yeah.
Does another one land? Do they find another one in the ice later? Do they find another one
Yeah.
somewhere in the jungle?
Yeah.
I'm dying to know. Like you could just do so many stuff. Like that, I just feel like there's so many ways they could do it. What they did do in 2011 was a prequel. They based it on what happened to the Norwegian outpost. There were female staff there, and slightly less diverse. Other than that, slightly more because you have more than one gender there. But it was interesting. A few interesting. It's not great. It's kind of boring, but it's okay. They tried to play around a little more with like, well, what happens if there's like you see it crash and two of them come back? Is it them? Isn't them? And instead of a blood test, they come up with that they noticed that anything that had become that was a thing didn't have anything inorganic. So like if you had an earring or a filling and a clone of you happened, it would not have the earring or the filling, you know. Well, any of the metallic fillings. So
Right.
if it was inorganic, it couldn't replicate it. Which was funny because then after I watched that and then I went and watched the thing 1982 again, I noticed how many of the characters in it had like nose rings, ear piercings, gold teeth. You know? Like if only they knew that. But you know, also, you know, 2011 versus 1982, they may not have been thinking that in 82, but if you watched it after watching the 2011 one, you'd be like, So I just thought that was fun. And worth a watch just because it was interesting to see, like, you know, was it 20, 30 years late, almost 30 years later, you know, what would the modern have taken? Now, it's funny because, like, I don't think they did any better with the effects from 2011, you know, than they did 82, and other than they were using CGI. They were okay, but they were nothing stellar. So just a
I'll have
thought.
to look up some of the scenes on YouTube and
No.
compare the special effects.
Oh, and also there's a tradition now, I think, is it the Arctic base? Sorry. I don't remember if it's the Antarctic or the Arctic base, but every year around Christmas, they watch the things. They watch all of them. They watch the thing from another world. They watch the thing 1982, and they watch the thing 2011.
Nice, I like
It's the
that.
South Pole Telescope Station.
Okay.
So
They
Antarctic.
watched first. They watched the original, and then they watched the other two adaptations. And they do it the
Love
first
it.
night after
It's
the park for
perfect.
the final plane of the season, which I think
I
is
like that.
it's adorable. So, anything more?
Not really.
It's
Uh, as
such a
far
good
like
film.
the first movie I enjoyed, the second movie, yes, is better. Neither of them are amazing. I mean, like I'm gonna counter the thing, the 82 version I really enjoyed, but it's to me it suffered a little bit from 80s, but you know, tiny bit dated, but no,
Oh,
not considerably. I think it still holds up.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is 80s, and it's you see 80s tech, which is always
hilarious.
80s tech.
Yeah,
The
I was giggling at that a bit.
one room when he's destroying the computers, and it's all those gigantic, like the huge computer towers that they used to have.
They're like maybe
Um,
10 piece.
yeah, I'm like, oh, okay, all right. I understand what time this is. So some of the stuff is a little dated. But for the most part, I thought it's a solid film. It remembering that it's 1982, um, you can't. It's a good film.
Yeah. At one point I forgot to bring up also, so character of Knowles, I don't remember if it was TK Carter or somebody else that read for it, but they lectured John Carpenter on his stereotyping
Oh, yes.
BIPOC
I
characters,
remember
and
you
I think
mentioned it
that's
the first
awesome and
time.
very brave, and I'm amazed that they did it. I didn't. I'm white, so obviously my opinion is very not great on this, but I don't know if he took that criticism into account because I didn't see too many terrible stereotypes unless they were saying that Niles roller skating and listen to you know, Stevie Wonder is a stereotype, maybe some of his voice characterizations, but I'm not real sure. So I don't know if John Carpenter took that characterization in, or if TK Carter toned down what John Carpenter was putting there. But I think it's amazing that somebody called that out, and should be called out, and very brave if you happen to be BIPOC and calling it out, because that means you generally probably aren't going to get the job. So and you can be given a reputation of difficult. So shout out to whoever did have a conversation with John Carpenter, and I hope he learned from it. I think he did, but again, I'm not the person to ask about that. But I did want to draw attention to it. So if anybody has an opinion, please feel free to share it. And other than that, I do really love the thing. Again, obviously the 80s tech is going to stand out and make you giggle, especially if you lived through the 80s. If you didn't, then you'd probably be very confused about what it was that they were doing with those screens and all. But I love the innovation of it. I loved how it was such a mix of genres and how it came out. I love how it drew you into like, who is it? Who could it be? Who's going to pop next? It's a very engaging film. And I love how every time you watch it, you're going to pull something else that you didn't notice before. It could be a negative thing like, this doesn't even make sense. Or did that guy just drink kerosene? So,
and there was one moment this time that made me laugh when he's recording, because he's doing a tape recording. McCready is to be like, hey, here's what's happening. And so he's giving like this play-by-play, and then he pauses it, takes a big drink, and then pushes record again. And I'm like, you couldn't just record yourself taking a big drink, dude? Like, I just thought it was hilarious.
Maybe it's not the memory of him that he wanted to leave behind.
I guess, but it just made me laugh because I was like, yeah, pause it, take a big drink. Yeah, yep. We don't want to hear you drink on the air. You're right. Podcasting 101, you don't eat or drink on air. But it made me laugh.
Yeah, it's funny. All right. Well, and I guess that kind of wraps it up. Is there anything else, ladies?
Not really.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. And I hope that this is the better version of our chat. And as far as you know, it is. So thanks for joining us. I hope you have an amazing November. And I'm Jenny.
Rebecca.
I'm Betsy.
And this has been Girls Go Schools.
You have been listening to the Girls Go Schools podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Girls Go Schools podcast, on Twitter at Girls Ghost Pod. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girls Go Schools podcast, and find our podcast on your favorite podcatcher.